que questões geopolíticas sequestram a agenda de discussões das várias instâncias do G20. Não nos interessa um G20 dividido. Só com uma ação conjunta é que podemos fazer frente aos desafios dos nossos dias. Precisamos de paz e cooperação em vez de conflito. O caminho que nos levará...
hijack the discussion agenda of the various G20 levels. We are not interested in a divided G20. Only through joint action may we face the challenges of our days. We need peace and cooperation instead of conflict. The path that will take us from New Delhi to Rio de Janeiro will require a lot of dedication and commitment from everyone. The technical groups and the preparatory ministerial meetings will be hosted in several cities in all our 5 regions of our country. For that reason, we will welcome the members of the G20 with open arms. And we need effectively to the support of all the people here, including the track record of this successful summit meeting that was hosted by our dear country, that is India. I will be very much honored to welcome you all to the Rio de Janeiro summit in November of 2024. And before I hand the hammer here, I would like to thank very much to Prime Minister Modi and to thank to the Indian people for the competence that they had for organizing this event. And I would like to say, Prime Minister Modi, that I personally am very much touched emotionally when I want to pay a homage to our dear Gandhi, that we paid a homage today. Everybody knows that in my political life, Mahatma Gandhi has great meaning because the struggle with nonviolence was a role model that I followed for many decades when I was in the labor movement. And that's why I'm very much touched and emotional and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to pay this homage that we did today. And I'd like to say to all of you that Brazil will take the chair of the G20 and we will make a tremendous endeavor to manage to at least try to do something as the same that our brothers and sisters from India did. Thank you very much.
Your Highnesses, Excellencies, जैसा आप सब जानते हैं, भारत के पास नवंबर तक G20 प्रेसिडेंसी की भी जिम्मेदारी है। अभी 2.5 महीने बाकी हैं। इन 2 दिनों में आप सभी ने अनेक बातें यहाँ रखी हैं, सुझाव दिए हैं, बहुत सारे प्रस्ताव रखे हैं। हमारी ये जिम्मेदारी है कि जो सुझाव आए हैं उनको भी एक बार फिर देखा जाए कि उनकी प्रगति में गति कैसे लाई जा सकती है। मेरा प्रस्ताव है कि हम नवंबर के अंत में G20 का एक वर्चुअल सेशन और रखें। उस सेशन में हम इस समिट के दौरान तय विषयों की समीक्षा कर सकते हैं। इन सब की डिटेल्स हमारी टीम आप सभी के साथ शेयर करेगी। मैं उम्मीद करता हूं कि आप सब इससे जुड़ेंगे। योर हाइनेसेस, एक्सेलेंसीज, इसी के साथ मैं G20 समिट के समापन की घोषणा करता हूं। वन अर्थ, वन फैमिली, वन फ्यूचर का रोड मैप सुखद हो। स्वस्ति अस्तु विश्वस्य, यानी संपूर्ण विश्व में आशा और शांति का संचार हो। 140 करोड़ भारतीयों की इसी मंगल कामना के साथ आप सभी का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
That's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who's speaking right at the final ceremony. The closing session that Prime Minister Modi spoke at. Just before him, the Prime Minister of Brazil, Lula da Silva, spoke extensively about the consensus that all the countries have reached about India really paving the way into conversations around development, climate change, and a lot more. Let me cut across to Abhishek Balla joining us live for more on that. Abhishek, the closing session of the G20 with Brazil Prime Minister speaking, and then you had Prime Minister Modi wrapping up. Give us a little more on the final words that were spoken. Prime Minister Narendra. All right, I'm going to try and patch with Abhishek. Pallavi Saha is also joining us, who's right there at the center, Bharat Mantapam, where we're seeing this grand closing ceremony of the G20 take place. Pallavi, what a successful ending for India. The real purpose to achieve consensus on the Delhi Declaration has been achieved. With Prime Minister speaking his final words, tell us what more did the Prime Minister of Brazil say?
Well, the president of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, in fact, spoke, and he, of course, listed out what will be the priorities for Brazil during its year as president of the G20. So he, in fact, listed out those priorities, which included social inclusion, which included, in fact, energy transition. Of course, we've made that a big, India made that a big part of its presidential year in terms of course, the launch of the Global Biofuels Alliance as well. We spoke a lot about climate change and climate action in our Delhi Declaration. So he's made that again a priority of his presidency. Also, he spoke about eradication of hunger and also, other issues which, of course, again, India laid a lot of stress on, which was, in fact, the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, which the Prime Minister admitted that we were quite off track on in terms of the listed, I beg your pardon, Sustainable Development Goals as listed by the United Nations. So those were, of course, the priorities that were, in fact, listed out by Brazilian President Lula da Silva, as, of course, the Prime Minister handed over the ceremonial gavel to him, which indicated that he's handed over India's presidency to Brazil. But, of course, like the Prime Minister himself said over there, India's presidency doesn't come to an end officially until November. And so a big suggestion there, Nabila, coming in from India and Prime Minister Modi is that there be a virtual session of the G20 in the month of November, where everyone can join in and assess the progress made on various goals that were set by this presidency of India in terms of what they declared was their intent in that New Delhi declaration, the leaders' declaration. So have an assessment of the same. So that was a suggestion that was coming in from the Prime Minister. He, of course, told all the leaders and the delegations present that his teams will be in touch with them.
All right. Stay with us, Pallavi. I also have Abhishek Balla joining us for more on that. Abhishek, we heard the president of Brazil. Brazil is going to be taking up the presidency next. So it was really a grand culmination for India indeed, with all kinds of countries, with opposing views, coming to a consensus on the Delhi Declaration. And on the final words of the Prime Minister, he also suggested a virtual session coming November. But that said, speaking of the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam theme, by and large, the Prime Minister has stuck to that in every sense, while even the declaration of those 84 paras have extensively spoken of inclusive governance or working towards people and for the sake of the people world over. It's not just for one country, it's for people at large. Culminated with that same theme, tell us more on the final words of the Prime Minister.
Well, Nabila, the Prime Minister ended his statement saying, let there be peace in the world. Now, that's a big message because there was a lot of speculation whether there will be a mention of the Russia-Ukraine war in the joint declaration. There was also a lot of talk about whether there will be an outcome statement at all. There was an outcome statement with 100% consensus. In fact, all 83 paras that are part of that statement, every paragraph had 100% consensus even within that. And that's the big takeaway of this summit. And it's also extremely symbolic that the presidency now goes to Brazil, because Brazil has played an extremely crucial role as far as bringing this consensus is concerned. Not just India and Brazil, which gets the presidency now. There were certain other countries that rallied around bringing this consensus, and these included South Africa, Indonesia, which was India's predecessor, Mexico, Turkey, Saudi Arabia. So clearly there was a group which was convincing the G7 and the Western countries that a joint statement is necessary if G20 needs to remain a significant platform for global affairs.
You know, Abhishek, I'd like to ask you, how different has India's presidency of the G20 been in terms of the final ending of it, the Delhi Declaration being accepted versus many of the others like Bali and Indonesia, where real consensus wasn't reached? How far and different has India's summit been this time?
Well, the Russia-Ukraine war was clearly the polarizing factor in this summit, and there was a lot of talk whether there will be consensus on it or not. In Bali, of course, the statement that was brought out clearly condemned Russia. There were very strong words used about the Russian invasion. That hasn't happened now. Having said that, you know, there are still strong statements that territorial integrity, sovereignty, territorial acquisition, the UN Charter on Security, all these aspects have been covered, global peace. So there are clear references to Russia's actions, but without pinning the blame on Russia. So that's the big difference. And it seems that Russia will go back pretty happy with this, although there are utterances from Ukraine. Ukraine has already stated that there's not much to be happy about what has happened at G20, but this is how diplomacy works, and a middle path had to be found to make sure that there is a consensus document that comes out if the G20 platforms needs to remain significant.
You know, consensus achieved. It's all now for it to be adopted. What's the buzz that you're hearing from people who have arrived, foreign delegates who have come by? How do they look at the Delhi Declaration? How far are they willing to adopt it with immediate effect? What's the real talk around there in Bharat Mandapam?
Well, Nabila, speaking to some of the international journalists who were here, you know, about 24 hours back, they were not sure whether there will be a consensus document, and they were quite skeptical about it, especially the ones from the Western countries. But there were enough hints thrown around from Indian officials that this is going to happen. And in fact, yesterday when the Prime Minister spoke, he dropped a big hint when he made a reference to the Russia-Ukraine war, saying that if we can fight COVID-19, there is no reason why the world cannot come together to win over the trust deficit that has emerged because of the war. So that was a big hint dropped. And also, if you go through the document, it says that while this is not the platform for resolving geopolitical conflicts like the Russia-Ukraine war, that had been India's stand, this is a platform for discussing economic progress. It does mention that the war has triggered economic distress in many of these countries, especially countries of the global south, the developing nations. And since India has been saying that India is the spokesperson of the global south, and that this document is in fact a document for the global south, that's why it became all the more important to touch upon the aspect of economic stress that has been caused because of the war.
Absolutely. Abhishek, do stay with us. What's the real takeaway from this last message from Prime Minister Modi at the closing ceremony of G20 is that the Prime Minister has now called for a G20 virtual session coming November. The Prime Minister suggests that virtual G20 session in November should be called for. India will be the president of the G20 until November, and he hopes to come together yet again with all those head of states there to come together and discuss one more round through a virtual meet to check the progress that's been made on the Delhi Declaration so far. If I may go to Polumi on that. Polumi, do take us through on the call. All right, we're first cutting across to Prime Minister Modi, who's made that call for a virtual meet in November.
जैसा आप सब जानते हैं, भारत के पास नवंबर तक G20 प्रेसिडेंसी की भी जिम्मेदारी है। अभी 2.5 महीने बाकी हैं। इन 2 दिनों में आप सभी ने अनेक बातें यहां रखी हैं, सुझाव दिए हैं, बहुत सारे प्रस्ताव रखे हैं। हमारी ये जिम्मेदारी है कि जो सुझाव आए हैं उनको भी एक बार फिर देखा जाए कि उनकी प्रगति में गति कैसे लाई जा सकती है। मेरा प्रस्ताव है कि हम नवंबर के अंत में G20 का एक वर्चुअल सेशन और रखें। उस सेशन में हम इस समिट के दौरान तय विषयों की समीक्षा कर सकते हैं। इन सब की डिटेल्स हमारी टीम आप सभी के साथ शेयर करेगी। मैं उम्मीद करता हूं कि आप सब इससे जुड़ेंगे।
All right, we heard what Prime Minister said. The G20 grouping should meet again. He calls for a virtual session in November. That's until that India will be holding the presidency of the G20 group. Let me cut across to Polumi Saha for more on that. Polumi, the Prime Minister calling for a virtual session in November, hoping to see if there's some progress on the Delhi Declaration. Tell us more on the response he's received on that statement.
Well, we'll of course have to wait some more, Nabila, to find out, because that's just a suggestion that he's made, of course, while concluding, this G20 Summit 2023. He said, of course, and he told the delegates and, of course, the heads of state who were present there that his team will be in touch with their counterparts in these respective countries in order to, of course, seek their consensus, in fact, to hold this virtual session. It's a very unusual suggestion which has been made by the Prime Minister. But this just goes to show how India, of course, has, taken the fact that it has led this delegation of some of the most powerful countries of the world and, taken that position of presidency over the last year very, very seriously. And the goals that it set itself, the priorities that it set itself, the agenda that itself set itself for this year, it has taken it very seriously. Much of it has been enunciated in that document which was put together, the New Delhi Leaders Declaration, the 83 paragraphs of that declaration. But now, of course, the Prime Minister wants to do a review of the same as well as to how we've progressed and what sort of commitments have these respective countries and international organizations that are part of the invited members have in fact made towards, of course, achieving all of those goals that have been set in the New Delhi Leaders Declaration, Nabila.
Right. Abhishek, if you're with me, this is more or less Prime Minister Modi's style, isn't it? He usually follows up on the word he's given. So he's asking for the G20 grouping to come together for a virtual session yet again in November. How are suggestions like this usually taken by world leaders? And do you think they would abide to something like this? As part of the Delhi Declaration, they're all supposed to be adopting the promise that's been made. Will it begin in time? All of those details will be discussed in November. If they can come together for a virtual session is what Prime Minister suggests. Will that be received well?
Well, there was a lot of suspense, Nabila, yesterday about the joint statement, and that suspense was broken suddenly when the big announcement was made. And now with this announcement made by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, there obviously will be more suspense and speculation as to what is going to be the agenda for this virtual session that Prime Minister Modi has called for in November. The sense that one gets is that that it will be a review of whatever is discussed. Now, that's quite significant because it might send out a message that there are certain things that are still need to be done, all boxes to be ticked perhaps, and that's the reason why the Prime Minister has asked for all the G20 leaders to come together virtually and put their heads down and decide something. But yes, till we have the contours of what exactly is the agenda for this, what the world leaders have to say, I think this will add another dimension of suspicion, if you want to call it, some mystery around the G20, but that will only be clear once we get to hear more on this.
All right. Well, the fact that all countries have come to a consensus on it, one would assume or believe, at least hope, that they would adopt this at the earliest. Let me cut across to some big news coming in. Just as there's been the closing ceremony of the G20 at the Bharat Mandapam, a crucial Modi-Macron bilateral that's reported to be shortly from now. Modi's working lunch with the French President, Emmanuel Macron. In fact, this is a lunch meet which is said to be a little longer than a usual bilateral meet that may take place at the Prime Minister's home itself. Lunch meet is more informal and will be slightly longer, and one knows that the kind of relation that Modi and Emmanuel Macron have shared. In fact, India and France have shared so long. In fact, Emmanuel Macron, who is going to be meeting with Prime Minister for a working lunch shortly from now. A big surge in India-France partnership. Modi-Macron's second meeting this year, while India and France begin talks on the second Rafale deal as well. Big strategic boost to Delhi-Paris ties. Follow me for more on that. Paulmi, what time is Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Modi's lunch meeting? And we believe this is a more casual meeting here where they'll have a little longer time for them to chat and a lot to be discussed, including the recent Rafale deal.
Well, as far as this interaction is concerned, it is being called a working lunch. So over lunch, basically the leaders and of course their support staff, who are part of the delegation, will in fact sit down and work out a few things in terms of their strategic partnership, check on the progress, review the same as well. India and France, of course, have been very close in terms of the relationship that they share, and they've, elevated the level of that relationship. You mentioned the Rafale deal, of course, that is just one of the defense factors that in terms of the defense sector that exists between the two of them in terms of the relationship that they have, and Abhishek will be able to share more on that. But we do know that the Prime Minister was invited as a guest of honor at the Bastille Day function in Paris as well, very recently as well. So clearly there is an elevation in the relationship between the two countries, and that is exactly what the two share, the two heads of state share as well, and that's what is going to be discussed at this working lunch as well, which is the first of the bilaterals that the Prime Minister is going to have. And then there's expected to be a pull aside with the Canadian Prime Minister, and subsequent to that many other bilateral meetings that the Prime Minister has scheduled. So while the G20 summit has concluded, the Prime Minister's work itinerary still is quite packed until this evening.
Absolutely. Multiple bilaterals to be held. To begin with, we believe it's with Emmanuel Macron, the French president. Abhishek, to tell us a little more about the equation that France and India really share. It seems like our equation has really built over the years thanks to Prime Minister Modi and the recent Rafale deal. That's really led to stronger ties and relations between India and France. This bilateral meeting, a working lunch, we believe, between the two will give them a little more time for them to chat on a lot of areas, including the Rafale deal. There's a lot more to come in the Rafale deal. Do take us through the inside story.
Well, Nabila, you're right. When the Rafale deal was clinched, and 36 French Rafales manufactured by French major Dassault Aviation were purchased by the Indian Air Force. It was a big deal. A lot was talked about it. There was a political controversy within India, but all that is left behind now. And in fact, on the cards is another deal with Dassault Aviation, this time for the naval version of the Rafale fighter jet, which the Indian Navy is looking for. Still a lot of speculation around it. We keep on hearing that it's a done deal, but no official announcement has been made yet. Not sure if that will come up during the meeting that the two leaders have today. But yes, defense cooperation is certainly one of the most important aspects of Indo-French ties. And over the years, we've seen how this has enhanced. And certainly, everybody, at least who follows defense and military, will be hoping and will be expecting some kind of an announcement for the naval version of the Rafale that the Indian Navy is looking for. There were trials done. We've heard that everything has been sorted out, and it's almost certain that the Rafale marine version has been chosen, but we'll have to wait and watch. But of course, this will be a crucial dialogue. In fact, the two leaders have met quite a few times in the recent past, and this informal lunch meeting will definitely add to the camaraderie between the two leaders and diplomatic relations between the two countries.
Absolutely. Abhishek, do stay with us. It's not just Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Modi. It's also another bilateral that has all the eyes on it, particularly that with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Big suspense indeed over Prime Minister Modi and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's meet. With surging Khalistani provocations in Canada, there seems to be huge buzz now that Modi is likely to rake up the issue when the two meet. In fact, in the past couple of months, major anti-India incidents have been reported in Canada. Despite all of this, Justin Trudeau seemingly has not taken any real concrete action against the Khalistani mob, which has made many think whether Justin Trudeau really is being soft on the Khalistani separatists, allowing Canada itself to become a breeding ground for it. Though Justin Trudeau has time and again refuted allegations of him being ignorant on the matter, claiming that his government takes serious actions against extremism, it now remains to be seen, interestingly, if Prime Minister Modi will rake it up and what would be the response of Justin Trudeau on the same. Now, it was on July 7th this year when Justin Trudeau seemed to have backed the Khalistanis when he said that, and I quote, "India is wrong." His comments came after External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar slammed Canadian Prime Minister for being soft on K-terror, to which Trudeau says India is wrong on that. Listen in.
They are wrong. Canada has always taken extremely seriously violence and threats of violence. We've always taken serious action against terrorism, and we always will. We have an extremely diverse country, and freedom of expression is something that we have, but we will always make sure that we are pushing back against violence and extremism in all its forms.
All right, I'm going to bring in Abhishek Bhalla for more on that. Abhishek, we know that the Khalistani separatists have been really causing havoc and targeting Hindu temples in many parts of the globe. Canada seems to be one place which has almost become like a breeding ground for Khalistani separatists. And while India has more often than not stood up against them, Justin Trudeau hasn't really been, he hasn't really strongly worded his statement to try and eradicate such elements, the troublemongers. But today with the bilateral talks, one hopes, or at least Indians really expect, that Prime Minister Modi will rake it up, and we've got to wait to hear what Justin Trudeau's response would be on that.
Well, Nabila, when it comes to the Khalistani movement, there is definitely a big difference of perception and approach that the two countries have. You know, for India, this is a separatist movement, a secessionist movement, and on the other hand, as far as Canada is concerned, a lot of domestic politics revolves around these characters who India says are separatists, Khalistanis living in Canada. But for them, you know, several politicians are part of their domestic.
Verantwortbar umzugehen. Wir haben ferner miteinander beraten über digitales Zentralbankgeld, also die digitalen Währungen. Das ist eine ebenfalls beachtliche Aufgabe, vor der wir stehen, Zugang zu Finanzdienstleistungen einerseits zu ermöglichen, andererseits aber neue Risiken für die Finanzstabilität, die sich daraus ergeben könnten, zu verhindern. Unter der Überschrift One Future haben wir uns in der letzten Session am heutigen Vormittag befasst, unter anderem mit künstlicher Intelligenz. Künstliche Intelligenz ist eine faszinierende Innovation, die auch einen Hebel für zusätzliche Produktivität darstellen kann. Potenziell verbunden sind damit allerdings auch Gefahren, nicht nur für die Arbeitsmärkte, sondern auch darüber hinaus für einen nicht ethisch verantwortbaren Umgang mit diesen neuen Instrumenten. Und deshalb haben die G20 verabredet, dass wir uns in der allernächsten Zeit mit der ethischen Fundierung auch einer möglichen Einfassung künstlicher Intelligenz in gemeinsame Regeln beschäftigen wollen. Das ist ein Prozess, der jetzt beginnt, auch auf der Ebene von Expertinnen und Experten und dann im nächsten Jahr vertieft werden soll.
Schönen Dank.
Well, that was the German Chancellor and his spokesperson really speaking on the sidelines of G20. But I'm going to cut to that. First, the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who is gracefully embracing his Indian roots. It was all out on display today before kicking off the day 2 of G20 summit. Rishi Sunak visited the Akshardham temple with his wife Akshata Murthy. In fact, the couple offered prayers in the temple, performing aarti. All of that was visible. He was seen photographs of some of the priests there as well. Rishi Sunak donned the sacred thread, the kalava, and posed for a quick photograph as well. The couple spent at least an hour in the temple amid tight security. It was only yesterday when Rishi Sunak expressed his desire to visit a temple during his India tour. In fact, Sunak also evoked Vasudeva Kutumbakam. He, in fact, penned a note to the Akshardham temple as well. This isn't the first time, though, that he's flaunted his Hindu roots. He's often seen performing puja, celebrating Diwali, Janmashtami, with his wife Akshata alongside. He even celebrated his first Diwali at the 10 Downing Street with full fervour last year. And this Delhi visit was his opportune time to indulge in his spirituality, and it was out on full display.
मंदिर में बहुत प्रेम से उन्होंने आरती की। क्या उन्होंने हमारे वहाँ राधा कृष्ण, सीताराम, पार्वती परमेश्वर, लक्ष्मी नारायण सबकी मूर्तियां हैं। सब मूर्तियों के पास में उन्होंने पुष्प रखे, प्रार्थना की हाथ जोड़ के, और कहा कि मैं बहुत प्रसन्न हुआ। बहुत प्रेम से उन्होंने कहा मुझे बहुत 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 आनंद आया है, और मैं चाहता हूँ कि मैं जब भी मुझे मौका मिले तो मैं आता रहूँ।
All right, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who's on a 3-day visit as part of the G20 summit, visited Akshardham with his wife. Sunak has also time and again expressed his deep connect to Hinduism on multiple public platforms, saying he's a proud Hindu.
Rishi Sunak, the first UK Prime Minister of an Indian origin, is also a proud Hindu. The British Prime Minister, who was spotted wearing Rakis during the G20 summit, visited the Akshardham temple in Delhi along with his wife Akshata Murthy on Sunday. Sunak, who arrived in India on Friday for the 18th G20 summit, expressed his deep connect to Hinduism.
Yeah, so I'm a proud Hindu, and that's how I was raised. That's how I am. And yes, we've just had Raksha Bandhan, so from my sister and my cousins, I have all my Rakis, and I didn't have time to celebrate Janmashtami properly. It's something that is important to me. I think faith is something that helps everybody who has faith in their lives.
The couple, who were received by Union Minister Ashwini Kumar Chaubey on Friday, were greeted with Jai Siya Ram. They were also gifted Rudraksh, a copy of Bhagavad Gita, and a Hanuman Chalisa.
Jai Siya Ram.
This isn't the first time Sunak has openly embraced Hinduism. He had visited the Hindu spiritual leader Murari Bapu in Cambridge for his 921st recital, titled Manas Vishwavidyalaya.
इतनी सबल राजपीठ पर बैठे हुए होते ही इतनी सरलता मैंने कम राजनेताओं में देखी है। जिस तरह वो गए और बच्चों से मिल रहे थे, लोगों को मिल रहे थे, ये जो है ये उसका बहुत अच्छा पहलू है।
And what I see Bapu does each day of his life.
Sunak addressed a gathering of people of Indian origin. He said his faith guides him in every aspect of his life.
Always be an inspirational figure.
I swear by Almighty God that I will be faithful.
After the 2017 general elections, he swore his oath to Parliament upon the sacred Hindu text, the Bhagavad Gita. As per British media reports, Sunak always keeps an idol of Sri Ganesh on his table. He earlier made an appeal to give up eating beef and claimed he has consumed it. Sunak was also seen performing Gau Puja in London. The video, which went viral, was shot when the 42-year-old visited a cow enclosure along with his wife Akshita Murthy, the daughter of Infosys founder N.R. Narayana Murthy, a practitioner of Hinduism and the first British Prime Minister of Indian descent. Sunak is not leaving his culture and values behind. Bureau Report, India Today.
All right, the G20's closing ceremony just ended, but yet a lot of bilateral talks with the Prime Minister. He's got a busy schedule. We're going to continue with our rolling coverage. For now, a short break. Do stay tuned.
A very warm welcome to Business Today TV. I am Chetan Bhutta.